will it be released? We kind of already talked about that. It will be released with Grails 3.1. And what does it give me? Why do I want this profile? We'll cover that in a little bit. And then where can I find documentation? I wrote a pretty complete example of documentation on the Grails docs. You can go find it right now in the 3.1.0 RC1 documentation. Under web service number 10. Okay. So one of the first things that it gives you is a project structure. So that's something that a lot of people kind of argue about, or they're not really sure what to do. And this is the kind of structure that we have provided as just a way to end that argument. And here's kind of the way we think you should do it around the Grails project structure, so that it will be a little bit more familiar to Grails developers than, say, a full-on Angular developer. Modules, as well as the definition of assets inside of their respective types. So you can have, as many deep levels of module that you want, and also have controllers, directives, domains, services, and templates. It also gives you a set of commands. So these commands help you create, you can kind of speed up your development a little bit. You can create controllers, directives, all of the different types of services. So if you wanted to create a ng service, and then you can give it a type flag, and you can say -type constant, and then it will produce that file for you. Just a create ng domain, which will use kind of a domain service builder factory thing that will by default use to define that domain class, a quasi domain class for you to use. And then create ng module component. Here, all of you are with Angular, but Angular 2 is really all about components, and that's kind of the future. And in Angular 1.5, they are releasing a type called a component. So you could say Angular.component, and that's kind of designed around giving you a more easy upgrade path to Angular as get released. And I think 1.5 is in RC0. So because we're working on 1.4, I essentially took what they did with 1.5, made a directive template that will do those things that they already have in 1.5. So a nice set of plugins, and you can install these plugins today without the Angular profile. These are not really specific to it, but these were the set of plugins to make Angular inside of a Grails application, because I really don't want to deal with Node very much. I really don't want to deal with NPM, because I've decent, and so if something else can manage that for me, I'm very happy. And I think all of these plugins were built by Craig Burke, and he created all of these plugins way before even the Angular profile was a thought. And they just happened to be out there, and they just happened to fit. And so, yeah, big thing, making this a much faster process of creating this profile than what it could have taken if they didn't exist. So the plugins are a Bower Gradle plugin. Gives you some additional configuration with those dependencies, so it's not as simple as I want XYZ dependency and it downloads to the specific folder. You can kind of change what folder you want the asset to go to. You can say, I just want this specific asset in the from Bower. I don't want the whole thing. So it gives you some additional what just normal npm and Bower would give you. The next one is Karma. Karma, if you're not familiar, is a test runner for client-side code created by the Angular team, and that is what we use to execute unit tests for client-side code. And I wanted to give developers an easier way to get into client-side testing, because I don't think a lot of people do that at all. Maybe some people do some Selenium or Jeb, but unit testing of client-side code I think is pretty rare, and so I wanted to give people an easy way into that. The next thing is the JavaScript closure wrap, which will wrap all of your files automatically in an IIFE so that you don't expose any globals. Which will allow you to just define templates in a folder, and then the asset pipeline plugin will generate a file that will automatically bring in all those templates. And the last one is Angular Annotate, so that you don't have to annotate your Angular code to prevent it from having issues with minification. It's you don't have to worry about. So I'll do a quick demo. I kind of have prepared a little bit because I know IntelliJ can sometimes take load up, especially if the Wi-Fi isn't so great. So I can just kind of show you that I did Grails. You guys see that? I can. I will just change the size of the chart. I'm not sure how to do that right offhand.
You have some profiles where you do that.
So
much better.
Okay. So this is the command that I loaded into IntelliJ. Right, that's it. Well, profiles can extend from each other, right? So the Angular profile extends from the REST API profile, because if you're creating an Angular application, typically a single-page application, you're not going to be a server. So I thought the REST API profile would be a good one to start from. Does that make sense?
Didn't like the REST one. Something else.
Something else. I don't know offhand what it does, but I think there's a base profile that all of them extend from. So yeah, it could be many levels deep, right?
Yeah.
And so one thing you might be wondering is, oh, okay, well you just said Angular. What if I have my own? How's it going to know about it, right? So there's some documentation on on the Grails docs that will kind of go over some of that, but the short end of it is that in your home file, in your home directory, you have a .gradle settings or something like that. If there's some in there, you can specify profile repositories where it will then look for profiles to use. Yeah, I ran this command, and I'm in IntelliJ here, and I can kind of go over some of the things. And let me get into the project, and I'll do some interactive mode. So, like I said about those commands, you can, everything is create-ng. You can just commands that you can execute, and that's really the short of it for the commands. And it's, if you're familiar with the Angular kind of different types of things, pretty much matches up with that. So I will show you now. One of the things that can be helpful to some is that that just gets built just by saying I want the Angular profile comes with a small Angular application to control the index page. The index page is just a big GSP, and it's just like a traditional, kind of way of doing things in Grails. So I created an Angular application to query a REST API for all of the data about the application. What plugins are you using, what versions, what controllers do you have, that kind of thing, and display that on the page. So this is kind of this is the domain service factory that I mentioned before, where when you say I want to create a domain, it will create a new one of these, which returns a $. Yeah, I think so.
Maybe
Maybe presentation mode or something like
cut
that.
the lights a little bit.
The problem is that dim is like all on or off, and then it becomes like pitch black in here. Yeah, exactly. But it'll just be a bunch of snoring.
So you want it to be white?
Yeah.
I
I'm watching it from the internet here, and it's really small.
I want to let me change it here. There we go. It's maybe 18. Is that better? I think I have to restart too. I'm not sure about that. But this is really what's important.
Even that's a lot easier.
Yeah, that's way better.
Okay. And it doesn't mean that you have to use these things. These are just kind of provided to you. You could, go in and delete all of this, and there's nothing wrong with that. Did a core module as well as an index module. Where there are controllers, and this is the project structure that I talked about, where we have .index, and we have our controllers, our directives. We have a service, right, that gets the data from the server, from our template that displays that data.
Where are your routes at? Were they in the core?
There are no. I don't have UI router included with this. This is just kind of just a basic example of for people that are maybe very new to Angular. Here's a real simple example of each of the types of files, right? I wanted to have at least one directive, at least one controller, right? So I can run this application. So obviously this is using Bower, right? And this is using Karma, and those are NPM, modules. But what's great about these plugins is that I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to install it. It's out of my realm of worry. I don't care. So while that's oh, there we go. And I'm on a not so good laptop, so you just have to give it a second. There we go. So all of this is fresh, and you'll see that I hit the application index, and this is the data that got returned, right? Which then populates. So this is a very simple Angular application for people that may be new to just kind of take example from.
Why would the internet would affect the response time?
Well, I think the first time you load up Grails on any time, it has to the JVM has to
Downloads the world.
Downloads the internet.
well, I think the JVM has to essentially you're using, right, because it's a just-in-time compilation, right? So there's a lot of time in getting all those things compiled for the very first time. As you see when I refresh, it's pretty quick.
I did a Grails to start the blank application. It's still running.
Oh yeah.
I still don't have a Grails.
Yeah, there's a lot of downloading.
Yeah, you're getting
It's downloading the internet.
A lot of dependencies. That's just kind of the nature of the way it works. So yeah, it's a pretty simple thing. But one of the most important is that whenever you create, let's say, a controller or a directive or anything, it also creates a test, a failing test case. Index controller, I already have written in some tests in here to test this application, this small application. So if somebody wants a real basic example on, hey, how do I get real started on testing unit testing my client-side code, here you go. I have a test for the controller, a simple test for the directive, and also a test for the service, right? So this is using Jasmine. Obviously there are others, but this is what will be generated when you create an asset. It'll generate a failing test. And I could do that here. So we have demo.core and demo.index. So maybe I'll say create ng controller demo dot demo. So what this will do is it will look, is there a module that's for this controller, and if not, create it, and create our controller, and then also create a test case, an empty test case. As you see, we now have controllers. We have our demo controller, which is just a very kind of blank controller to get started with. And we also have demo controller spec, which will include a failing test case. And to run these tests, it's as simple as saying karma run, and that may be difficult to see, but there's a Gradle task that's under the karma directory called karma run, and you just run that, and then that will execute all of your client-side tests.
Does karma stay running as a daemon, or do you have to keep executing it?
Well, there's a karma watch task, and then there's also a karma run task. So I think if you say karma and continue to run whenever there's changes, and we can look at some of the configuration for those things.
Compilation thing?
I think it's a karma thing.
It's a karma thing.
Yeah. So if we look at some of these, so this is our Bower configuration. So this normally look like, but we're just including 3 different libraries: Angular Core, Angular Resource, and Angular Mocks, and we're saying 1.4.x. And as soon as 1.5 is released, we'll say 1.5.x, but there's nothing preventing you from saying I want 1.5.0 RC1, right? and it will put those assets Bower. I want Angular resource to go into the Angular directory, right? And same thing with mocks. So that way I have all three of my Angular assets under the same folder. We worked with Craig Burke, who wrote the Karma plugin, to modify his default AngularJS profile, his settings profile, so that's all you need for Angular to be able to find all your files and load them in the correct order. And that's it. And change it however you like. And there's documentation on those things. There's documentation linked to those in the Grails docs. I link to the documentation of all of the other plugins that are. And one of the other plugins that was used was called Wrapped, or JS Closure Wrap, and that's used here. So as long as this little snippet of your code, then this entire code block will be wrapped in an immediately invoked function expression, right? An IFI. And whenever it automatically will import different things. It will require Angular. It will require anything that it needs to require. It'll require the domain service factory, right? And if you decide, you know what, I don't like this domain service factory, you just delete it, and then it'll use $resource directly. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like that. Does anybody have any questions, comments?
How hard is it to make a profile?
It's not that difficult at all, really. You can define commands if you want, and creating commands is I would say a non-trivial thing, but it's not, rocket science. You can default files very easily. You can include default dependencies pretty easily. So overall, I think it's a relatively easy process.
Is the process documented on the help page pretty well?
It is. It is in the Grails docs. There is a whole section on creating profiles.
Okay. It's just 3.1.
Yes.
Okay. Can't.
Yeah, 3.0 had profiles. You just couldn't have your own. You were stuck with whatever the ones we gave you. That's what you got. But in 3.1 you can create your own.
And how do you profile? Right.
So there's only one prerequisite to using your own profiles. There's a file in your home directory, and I think it's under .grails or .gradle, where you'll specify where your profiles repositories. What are those repositories that are stored? At the end of the day, a profile is just a jar file, right? It's just in a repo, and that's it, right? So you have to specify what repos store your profile. And then it would work exactly the same way. You would just say Grails create app, whatever, -profile, and then the name of it.
So are you just adding an additional repo at that point, or is it?
You're adding an additional profile repo, right? Because it has to know this is where I'm going to look for profiles and not any other dependency.
This is just like a standard Maven, like Nexus.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You go to your Grails configuration, you add a repo.
Yeah, although it's not the difference is in the Grails one is that you and this one you add it in your home directory.
So you can't put it in your config.
Well, you don't.
Well,
you don't really need to, right? Because how many profile repositories are you having? right?
Probably.
Today,
Everyone will make their own and share them, right?
no, today very few.
Yeah.
But
You know
in
what I
the
mean?
future,
Well,
everybody.
sure, I can imagine with that, where somebody publishes
Yeah,
their
publish on
profiles.
profiles.
I want to pull that into my, whatever Grails environment and
Right.
use it. So the question I have is there an order of precedence? If I create my own Angular, am I going and I say Grails profile Angular, am I going to use mine or the built-in one?
So that's a good question. You say any profile that already exists in the Grails repository, if you have one in your Maven cache, it will use it, right? I'm not sure about the order of the profile repository definitions, as far as, will it take, the first one or the last
Well, I
one?
assume you can give it a fully qualified, so if you don't just call it Angular.
Sure,
But
sure.
the
If I give it
Maven
a
resources
if I give it a
usually have
unique
3
name,
pieces.
then I'm going to get it, right? But
Yeah.
I'm just curious about name collisions.
Yeah, I didn't get, I didn't think to ask that question.
Okay, yeah, so all you need to do is in your Grails, in your home, user home, Grails, and there's a settings.groovy file, and then you can put the repos, and they're
Right.
repos, right? So,
So
it's
it's not-
whatever order you want to put them in.
Do they have to be
precedence,
Is
so.
the built-in one in there as well to begin with?
The built-in one is defined in Grails itself.
Yeah, so it's not listed in there, I don't think. It's
No.
your own.
So the question is what's the order?
So if I were to go find someone's profile in Bintray, I have to go into the settings.groovy file and add it so that when I type Grails, create app profile, it knows. Yeah, like
I would have to guess it's the order you list.
Yeah.
Well, I guess
But I could be
the
wrong.
moral of the story is don't collide with existing profiles.
Fully
right?
qualified.
Right.
Create new
Your
names.
Yeah,
package.
because one of the nice things is that if you want to, let's say, add on to the Angular profile, like you say, hey, for our company, we appropriate for the general audience. You could say my profile depends on the Angular profile and get everything that it has plus whatever you want to add.
So override whatever.
Default behavior in Grails.
Yes.
So you don't get the domain controllers and everything else you normally would get.
Well, it's whatever you want, right? Because you define the dependencies, and if you say I don't want to include services, or you change what profile is on base, right? Because maybe the base profile says you get services.
Right, but would
Right.
they all be stuck under module, or would you have a Grails app directory and the module directory?
I think you still have create service and create controller just like you would in a normal Grails.
It depends on what profile you extend from.
Okay, let me try it from this direction.
Yeah, base profile has like nothing in it. at
So-
all. Right?
Can I-
The profile?
No, I'm,
So
so you use this, you have it set up. You can still do as much Groovy service, anything else that you want, right?
Yes,
Can you have none?
it's possible, right? It's just you have to choose.
You'd have
You have to be
really
careful on
creative.
which profile you're extending from and what's in that tree. Or in some profile that you're extending from that's extending from, then you're going to get services,
So
right?
like in this directory, did you get services?
Oh yeah,
Then
yeah,
the Grails
definitely.
services.
The
Not-
Grails directory looks
Right. Have
Yeah,
conf.
it probably just doesn't have GSPs.
Well, that's what-
Well,
all that
well,
stuff.
the only there is one exception. So I took the REST API profile and I did add in GSP support for one simple reason. It can make your life a lot easier when you are first loading up your single page application. There are sometimes
Okay.
things with either
Yeah.
authentication and it's just sometimes easier to do that in GSP. So you do have GSP support, and I have by default an index.gsp.
Okay.
Have more than one profile going, whatever, right? And this profile, I mean, you can, but it's through a chain, not like
Correct.
calling different ones.
Correct. And one of the other things about profiles that's interesting is Graham made a video about profiles, and it kind of went over this a little bit. in that profiles can have features, right? Where, you know, maybe you're not using Hibernate in your application, Neo4j or Mongo or whatever. You can define features in your application where all of the dependencies, say for Hibernate, is in this feature. And you could say, include that feature by default, or don't include it by default, and you have to explicitly say on the command line, I want that feature. And I could show you.
Are you using that?
RAM did a lot of changes to the kind of way it was organized, so I couldn't tell you off the top of my head which features are there and that kind of stuff. But he kind of the way it does, and I think they're all included by default. And there's the default Grails profile repository. It's under Grails. It's Grails/Grails-profile-repository. All of the source code for all of these included profiles, so you could see what features are available. It's just to me that's the kind of the easier way of just going straight to the source and
Sure.
yeah. Application, you know, create app test dash profile. You can say, okay, well, I want the Angular profile, but as far as my features, I want.
You're in Grails right now.
Yeah, I understand. This is gonna run it, but you could say I want Hibernate and Mongo, right? MongoDB. I forget
There's
what it's
probably some
called.
way you don't want Hibernate.
Right. Yes. So. Right. Yeah. So most of the time, you kind of set up some features just as a way of separating out your profile, so that you don't have everything kind of all jumbled together, and then set them all.
So do you think people will start like publishing profiles like on sites like they do plugins?
I think so. I think that's kind of what we're hoping, that that the community will kind of take this idea and run with it. You know.
So do you think, like in your opinion, like when people do that, like will the like a really important part of that the profile page will be like kind of the chain of profiles it depends on, and is there a way to get a circular situation going on, like where one profile depends on another one that depends on another one, basically?
I think it would be pretty hard because it's kind of there's already an existing project tree, right, for the default profiles, so you would have to introduce that yourself.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? You're not going to get that or any of us. So is that possible?
It's more like when the community is involved.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I would hope Gradle and whatever.
Yeah. It's a total Grails function at this point that manages. There's not much to do with Gradle. It's all Grails code that kind of manages the order and the extends and all of that. So, I'm sure it is. It probably would break, I would imagine.
And Grails usually doesn't love circular dependencies.
Right.
It hates that more than anything. So,
yeah.
action on bin tray would be like published ones that are recognized with
Yeah.
upload, right?
Don't do circular.
Right, because there's nothing preventing anybody from saying, hey, I want a React profile.
Yeah.
You know?
That's cool.
And that's the way it is now, right? You can share your own bin tray, or you can put them in the main folder.
Mm-hmm.
How long have you been working on this for?
We worked on it for probably about a month. Probably about a month, yeah. There was a lot of kind of... Yeah, there was a lot of issues with the because 3.1 is still in, at that time it was in milestone 3 when I first started, so there was a lot of and got resolved as a result of me creating this profile. So along the end result was what I think is a decent profile, and also a lot of bug fixes too. So
it's going to be available in 3.1x or something?
It's available right now in 3.1 RC1.
I just ran it with RC1.
Yeah. Right. So you can do it with 3.1 RC1 today, or wait till 3.1 is released in early mid-February.
So totally unrelated question is what's the compelling reason for me to migrate my 3.01 app to 3.1?
Well, if you want the ability to create your own profiles, that would be one compelling reason. Another compelling reason, I think, would be performance. And some performance improvements in 3.1, and obviously bug fixes, that kind of stuff. You know, a lot of issues have been resolved. Form 5 as well, yeah.
A ton of old code ripped out. Compile static wherever you can.
Hibernate was kind of baked in, and he was able to split it out and be more right.
That might be. So we have a 2x app that has a Gorm issue. I wonder if it'd be worth trying to step up.
You guys are on an older 2x, right? You might go to 2.5 and have it fixed.
Right.
Maybe.
I mean, how many people are using 3x for professional purposes? Trying to port their apps.
Well, we did both.
Yeah.
We have some ported and we have some that's pre-built.
People are migrating all the time. That's a project I've been working on with the customer. With OCI, they've upgraded, so they've got all the new features of all the new things, and it's all Gradle based. So you can bring lots of things in the fold with Gradle, and problems we always used to have that were really hard to shake down with Ivy and things are easier to manage. Granted, you've got Gradle, so if you don't know Gradle, that could be a whole new set of problems for you. But it's also an opportunity way.
It's a temporary problem.
Spring Boot is just a different way of doing things a bit, so that takes some adjusting.
And there's a lot of work in converting plugins too, right? Because a lot of people want to start creating apps in 3.1. The plugins that you would want or need are converted yet, and we think that the vast majority of them are, but there is some plugins that are just not have to convert.
But let me say, it's not that big of a deal to convert a plugin.
It's not. No.
Not usually.
It depends a lot on that's I think sometimes what can slow down a conversion. But if you just have kind of a standard plugin that just brings in some dependencies and
if the plugin's doing a lot of really funky internal Rails things that probably have all moved and are different now,
that they shouldn't have done in the first place, right?
If you're highly dependent on the event model of the old Grails system.
But even I have to do some hard ones. So there's some that I need to put back to publicly released. There's one that it's working just fine on Grails 3. I need to take that out of the fork code we have with the customer and push it, and they're cool with that. And then there's one called Grails Cache Redis. So if you use Redis caching for it, is another one we did.
I did the Spring Security REST one.
Yep, awesome. Spring Security's there. There were a lot of people weren't using Grails 3 until Spring Security was out, right? Now Spring Security's out, so the main blocker for probably the majority of people is that. There's a lot of old plugins you just don't even need anymore because Grails just does that now.
So the Spring Security REST is available for what version?
For 3.0 and 3.1, yeah.
Did OAuth make it in the
Yeah, I actually did a little bit of improvements to that as well in the base Pack4J project.
Fresh off the press.
Yeah. So yeah, I got those changes included in Spring Security REST as well, because that's what it reuses Pack4J for OAuth support.
And what's the other one that the Alvaro Sanchez works on? There was another REST one.
That's the only one I'm aware of.
Maybe it was just Spring Security REST. Is that the one you did a lot of stuff on too?
Yeah, I kind of converted it to Grails 3, and then he managed all of upgrading the test applications and things like that. He kind of did the polish work there at the end and made sure. I tested it too,
cool.
But yeah.
Does Gorm stand for Grails or just Groovy? Did you need?
Gorm stands for Grails Object Relational Mapping.
With the new Gorm, is it actually has to be dependent on Grails anymore?
No,
there's a Gorm standalone.
Yeah, you make Spring Boot app that runs Gorm by itself or whatever.
Yeah. It has been separated out.
Part of
So I was
that,
wondering if it, like, if it stands for Grails in one.
Yeah, it's probably not a completely appropriate name at this point, but I think it's kind of been around for so long that
it's
it's
been
just
such an integral part of Grails. That
right.
Even if you're not running Grails, you're using a part of Grails, right? A lot of that work when 3 and 2.5 was part of pulling all that out, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
so it can be its own thing.
Yeah, because there's really no reason why I couldn't, right? It's
There was the guy that did the asset pipeline plugin. He originally made it for Grails, and then he realized, oh, I can just make this a Gradle plugin and use it for whatever. And so he backed it out to where it's not just a Grails thing, but anything can use it, Rat Pack or whatever. So.
But then you didn't call it Grails.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing with asset pipeline is we snicker every time we see it. It writes these little files all over called ass cache.
yeah, they did. Yeah. I think Graham just asked him recently, hey, can you move that to the build directory? We don't want to see that.
I know where it belongs.
You leave an ass cache everywhere.
Right. Is there anybody here that's kind of like a core Angular developer that hates my project structure? That'd be a good discussion.
Anybody here doing Angular already?
Rich does.
And did it.
I've looked at it.
A lot of people have like really, and
That's one reason why I wanted to invite the Angular JS crowd here, because I did that Angular stuff for my company, but I come from the totally opposite direction. I'm like server-side guy that was pushed up into client side and had to figure out how to make client Angular work. I really want somebody that's sort of comes from the other direction, right? More of the JavaScript kind of guy who discovered Angular and not really, it doesn't care so much about the server-side kind of stuff.
It's kind of hard, right, though, because we were talking, I think about that the other night, that initially there was people giving input that were pure Angular people that had nothing to do with backend things. And they're like, look at this and be like, what is this? Why would I use this?
Right. They're like, where's my gulp?
Yes, where's my gulp again? Yeah. So they have an opinion of like, kind of, I don't know why you do this. So for Grails people, it helps them make Angular apps. So that's the point of it.
Yeah, that's maybe just for my own selfish purposes, because I don't really understand the other side so well. I know what I have to go through.
You don't have a handlebar mustache.
Yeah, I know what I go through on a daily basis, so it's like, why do you want Valor when I can just do this? I can just like grab it, put it right here, and I got my stuff.
Yeah. The benefit of Bower is that you don't have to store your client-side dependencies in source control, right? And if it comes out with a new version, you can automatically grab those new versions if you desire. And if somebody wants to just start working on your project, it could be a much lighter process of pulling that down, and then it will just automatically grab those assets when the application runs.
So you said you mentioned you're all using Karma and Jasmine.
Yes.
Does it have the same issues where trying to get the order of the JS files?
Yeah, that's all. I mean, that is
That's
a problem, but it's been taken care of.
Okay.
Yes, as long as you're sticking to the project structure that this provides for you, then no problems.
So it'll do so if I include a dependency, it'll include a dependency in the Jasmine?
So it's a Karma thing, really, right? So Karma, as an example, as long as your module files are defined or are brought in ahead of time, it really doesn't matter what order everything else is brought in, right? As long as all your modules are defined, then it doesn't matter. Does that make sense? Because all you're doing is just editing those modules, right, with all your controllers, your services, your directives.
Well, they would want to grab everything. So in your Bower directory, you have the uncompiled version, you have the minimized version, and everything else. Those are all there, right? So they would like pull the same file over and over again.
Well, no, because the things in your Bower directory only exist once, right? And so it pulls those in first. The first thing it does is it pulls in Angular core, and then it pulls in the rest of your things
Bower is cleaned up. So the Bower doesn't have the
No.
full version and the minified version?
No, it does not. And that was one of the things that I said in your build.gradle. I'm specifying right here that all I want is angular-resource.js. I don't want the minified version. This is the only file I care about. And when you grab it, put it in the Angular folder. So that's why it gives you features above and beyond what you can normally do just with Bower, right? So yeah, if you were to look at what this profile is in Karma, you would see how it's loading in those files. And so, yeah, I mean, it took a little time to get that right. You know what I mean? Right? But once you got it, as long as you're sticking to that project structure, then you don't have to worry about it.
So a general question about profiles and kind of related to this profile specifically. So we use Mocha for our tests instead of Jasmine.
Yeah.
So if I were to want to, like, say, contribute to this profile, how tightly coupled is Jasmine to the creation of the profile? Or can you specify that as a feature set? Where you can say, I want featured Mocha instead of Jasmine.
Right. So essentially how that would work is that it would have to be some sort of flag, right? When you're saying create controller, dash, testing framework or dash whatever,
Right.
and then specify Jasmine or Mocha. And then there would have to be a different set of templates, right, for those test cases for Mocha. So it's absolutely possible.
What would you think would be the best practice on that, though? Would you do that, or would you create like a different profile that then instead generated Mocha?
There could be a different profile that generated Mocha tests, but then kind of what would you call it? I don't know if that would be the most intuitive way of going about it. It's definitely possible. So yeah, it would just take some thinking about and do a little research and see what would make sense for everybody, because one of the thing about these profiles, and especially the ones that we're writing, is that we want to make as many people use the people developed it, right? So we kind of have to consider who are we targeting and then make it as easy as possible for those people, because there's Jasmine, there's Mocha, I'm sure there's others, and so we just kind of had to pick one that we thought was the most popular and go from there.
Kind of went like pretty low. That's good IntelliJ. Do you think IntelliJ will ever be smart enough to pick up the fact that you have profiles and like add new command line like commands to the menus and stuff? I mean, it doesn't. It's hard to do.
Well, those would appear as Gradle tasks.
Well, no, not because those.
Provide,
just like there isn't. I don't believe.
DBM update. If you open that one.
DBM update is in the build script portion, right?
Oh, that's right.
Of your build.gradle. So that's what gives you those Gradle tasks.
Yeah.
But like if you want to say, and I'm checking right here so I don't be a liar. But like if you want create ng controller, I don't believe that that's listed in your Gradle tasks. No, right?
Yeah, because it's like a dynamic task.
Yeah,
they don't list those.
Right, it's not a Gradle task.
It's really searching the repository when you type it in, right? It goes out and looks in the repository.
Well, what it does is it actually makes it a dependency of your project, right? I think it's actually listed here, right? So profile.
Yeah, once you've created your app. Yeah.
So you see that? So that Angular profile is now a dependency of your project, right? So that all are now to your project, so you can say create ng controller, and you're good. It doesn't have to do any kind of lookup. Does that make sense?
It's reports on the JetBrains where you can vote it, right? That's how they do it, actually. When you get one bug fixed, enough people have to vote for it. And so adding Grails 3 support was something they got like votes for.
Because we got Gradle support.
like I always say,
Yeah.
like, do the Control Shift G and just type the command out.
Right.
Yeah.
It'll be like, yeah, I don't
So,
know.
so if we can get it just listed as an item and have people vote for it, they'll.
I mean, even if they did it, like it would have to be like a right click, like menu item, all over the place.
It would have to be
Yeah.
a tab or
Probably
something.
isn't gonna happen.
But that's really how you did in Grails too, right?
Yeah.
I think it's Control Alt G, right, to bring up the Grails.
And
But
they
you
added,
could also, they had a
actually-
Grails tab though, but you could do stuff in there too.
well, they added a
Right.
terminal
You don't
in
have
the
that.
project now.
Right. Yeah. There's a terminal right here where you can open up where you can open up
Yeah.
Grails, interact, type all the commands you want all day, right?
So yeah, I'm just random, like, IntelliJ question.
Yeah. Although IntelliJ probably is the best out of all of them, I think.
Especially GGTS, right? Dropped, so
Gosh,
it
yeah.
was never that good anyway.
It was always horrible.
But now it's like I see people still posting questions about why they can't get Grails 3 to work with it.
One other question that
But
self-invoking anonymous function syntax that you showed us earlier.
Yeah.
What brings that in, and like, what's the idea behind that? Like, that wasn't
Yeah.
me, but it generates a JS file that has
Right.
self-invoking.
So it's an asset pipeline plugin. This is the dependency right here. It's called JS closure wrap,
Gotcha.
right? So part of the problem with that is that you can't wrap everything, because then, as an example, Angular wouldn't exist on the window. You couldn't use it. So you can't wrap all files that go through asset pipeline. So what you have to do is define. You have to tell it, right? And so if you look at, say this controller, there's this comment up at the top. And if you're used to asset pipeline, this is kind of how you would say, this requires X, Y, Z. Index controllers. Let's see here. Right here. So you could see this is wrapped. It requires itself, and then it's requiring those directories.
And that's the index.js file?
No, right. Index.js, right.
I mean, that's in the modules directory.
It's in JavaScript's demo index.js. So this is what comes with. Yeah, you could create modules that are on the same level as demo, right? So it is kind of nested in that way, where it is demo.index, right?
What's the level above? I can't read what.
Yeah, right. So you have JavaScripts,
Oh, JavaScript.
okay, and then you have demo, and then underneath that you have index. So this requires itself, so it's going to load this file, and then it's going to require tree, which means all files in those directories, which is services, controllers, directives, templates, right? And it looks like this is missing domain.
Yep.
Well, I don't think it has any domains by default, so that's why it doesn't list it. But it's right.
I never used that file. I probably just need to look into it.
Yeah, that's this kind of stuff right here. This is standard asset pipeline.
Are you still using resources? Is that, okay.
Oh yeah, that conversion is not that fun, I can tell you.
Necessary.
But necessary.
What does
Yes.
that generate? Like, is that the actual mode in the browser, or like it generates another JS file? Like,
No, yeah, this would be the actual file, although modified, right? Because we're wrapping it in an IFI.
yeah.
So if you go look at it in the browser, find it. So if we look at it, you can see that we have use strict, and it's wrapped in, right? And that's added by asset pipeline and the plugins that are included.
Yeah. Just wondering. I do a lot of wonder whenever people do that, like, if it's worth it. Like, is it? I mean,
Is it worth it? Well, the benefit of it is that is the plugin ecosystem for Asset Pipeline, right? So resources, there's not many or not any plugins for resources to say, you know, I want you to do some sort of processing on my files, like wrap my file, and I don't believe that that's possible with the current state of resources. And because of the way Asset Pipeline is designed, it allows you to do pretty much anything you want. Like I know Asset Pipeline plugin. So for when we do Angular 2, you know, you'll be able to write your TypeScript with Asset Pipeline and be on your way.
Yeah, we're using the SAS Asset Pipeline.
Right. If you're using less or SAS, there's one for both.
So is it Grunt actually managing the wrap, or is that what you?
No, Asset Pipeline is doing that. Right. This is the actual dependency for Asset Pipeline that's doing that specifically is this JS Closure Wrap Asset Pipeline, right? It's an Asset Pipeline plugin that.
So Asset Pipeline is doing the minification as well?
Yes. You can set it to. I think in dev it doesn't do it by default.
Asset Pipeline's good stuff.
Right. So if you don't want to manage a whole npm gulp grunt build process, you know, Asset Pipeline's pretty simple. You don't have to really do anything other than kind of define, you know, what files depend on. No, that was in 2.4.
2.4. It started in 2.4, yeah, and it was officially dropped completely in 2.5, I think. Where you had to use.
I mean resources.
Worked on resources. Mark Palmer completely got out of the Unity Grails team and became an iOS developer or something like that. So he was the main guy that was on the resources plugin. So it basically lost the person doing it. So
That's okay.
luckily Asset Pipeline came to the rescue. So.
What are the other, like the other comments, like that in that file you showed us? There's
right. So is requiring other files to be included after this file, right? We're requiring all files and services, all files and controllers, all files and directives, and all files and templates. Right. So it will load those assets in the browser in the order that you specify with these comments.
Gotcha.
Right.
If it helps, you're your CSS files, and you want to specify the order because it's important, because you need some CSS to override other CSS, right? So
right.
You specify exactly.
One of the other plugins is, so this is the Angular Annotate Asset Pipeline. So if you're familiar with Angular, you know, it all works based off of dependency injection. You say, I want ABC service. Okay, well, if you go to minify, ABC service is just an input to some method, right? Some function. And so when you go to minify, it'll be Angular is, right? So it's a common problem, and typically what people have to do is you have to define what are the names as strings, right? And say is the common way of doing it. And specify what these names actually are, right? But if you noticed in my code, I didn't have to write this, right? Asset. So it just saves development time, just makes your life easier. And then the last one is what people don't want is when they go to get a template, they don't want to do a request, give me the template, right? Because every time you request a new one, it has to go get it from the server, right? So it's in the template cache. But a lot of times people just say, hey, put all my templates in the template cache. I don't ever want to make a request. And so if you look at inside templates, right here, there's an application. Take all of your templates and put them into the template cache immediately, right? So I only have one template, so there's only one item here. But you know, if I have 5 stuff, right? So those are kind of the features of this profile that I included, which you can include on any of your projects. Together to make people's lives a little bit easier.
Awesome. All right, thanks, James.
Okay. Thank you.
Where are you off to next, James?
Tonight in my hotel, yeah.